Star of the show tonight. Why we're here. So, he's turned B. How did you go that fast red? Like seriously, that was like an upside down thermometer in 0 to 2 seconds. So if anyone has not been to Stockroom Supply, right, just in Wainfleet, phenomenal place to go visit. You'll probably see him at all the woodworking shows. So Katie's from Stockroom Supply, so she's going to talk about the finishing, right? Because the first thing you're going to do for finishing is
sandpaper, more
prepping.
Pre-finishing.
Prepping. Everyone's favorite thing is to sand. Control your enthusiasm, guys. Right? We're not going to make you sand.
Not unless they want to. Colin brought actually some sanders so people can try those out.
Nice. Right? So thank you so much for coming in, by the way. But yeah, take it away, bud.
Awesome. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to stand on this side of the table. I've only ever done this presentation online to people. This is my very first time doing it live with real people, so this is kind of exciting. But I'm used to holding up my things in front of a computer screen, so this is better for me to stand on this side of the table. So yes, as Kevin said, I am from Stockroom Supply. We are a family-run business. I am the daughter, the sister of the family. We've been in business for many years. So I've been a part of that for about 25 years. As you can imagine, I've picked up a couple of things through my experience working for my family business. And when you grow up in a thing like that, you kind of, it's necessity to know it, not necessarily because you always want to know it. You have to know it because that's how you eat. So anyway, I've picked up a lot of random things over the years, specifically about sandpaper. That's become my kind of my area of expertise. I guess a lot of you guys already know that too, and I don't normally dig into anything a little bit personal, but because so many of you guys already know me, know my connections to Stockroom, I'll just give you a little extra. But I'm married. I have 2 boys, 15 and 13. We live in the sprawling metropolis of Wellandport. Since all of you guys are local, you might know where that is. And right, there are some Wellandport. Yeah, there's some familiar faces in the crowd from Wellandport. So, and something else that's kind of interesting is my husband and I and our boys this past summer started an elk farm. So if you hear about an elk farm in Niagara, that is us, and we have 40 elk, and they keep us very busy now. So when I'm not at the shop working, I'm at home with an elk herd doing all sorts of elk things. So yeah, that's just a quick little synopsis. So as I was saying, I've picked up a ridiculous amount of knowledge about sandpaper over the years. It's a very broad topic. There are so many different things that I can talk about. There's also so much opinion on it. It's a very personal subject, which kind of seems silly, but it just is. You're going to talk to all sorts of people. They have different opinions on it. Everything tonight is mostly my opinion, but I think that it's also stuff that's really helpful information. So what I'm hoping that you guys go away with tonight is that you gain an appreciation for the role that sandpaper plays in your project. You guys go to a ton of work to actually make something, build something, put all sorts of hours into it, and then everybody hates the end. So nobody likes sanding, but I would challenge everybody and say sanding is the most important, or the finishing is the most important part of the project. So you really want to make sure that you're using the right thing for that job. So hopefully I'm going to debunk some of those kinds of things for you guys tonight and help you to appreciate that portion of the process a little bit more. Also, this one, nowadays, everybody wants to do this, save money. I am going to hopefully give you guys some information that in the long run is going to save you guys some money for your sandpaper. Sandpaper is an investment. It is not inexpensive, and you want to make sure that you're spending your dollars properly. So hopefully you guys are going to learn some things tonight, not only on what you're purchasing for what job, but how to store your sandpaper to make it last a little bit longer for you. So that's one thing, saving money. I like that one myself. So, and then hopefully you'll also just go home. I just hope that you kind of go home with learning at least one thing that you didn't know before you walked in this door. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into it. And we're going to go right back into the very earliest days of sandpaper. And I'm kind of history buff too. So I like history, and I kind of looked into how long has sandpaper been around. And the first recorded the first time sandpaper was ever recorded in history was in 13th century China, and they used shells and stones and seeds, and they stuck it to parchment paper with natural gum. So that's kind of the very first time sandpaper was ever mentioned that we know of. It's also shown in murals in ancient Egypt, where they're using pieces of sandstone to sand furniture. So that's kind of neat. And then there's also recordings of Romans using shark skin. Shark skin is really rough. You might have heard that one before, but that is another form of ancient sandpaper. So it's been around for a lot of years, different forms. And then, of course, history and science and manufacturing all happens. And now we've come to the point where we've really done a lot with sanding, and we have some things that last longer, and we're going to touch on some of those things tonight as well. So let's start with grit. Grit is the material or the thing that is stuck to the backing, and that's what makes it sand. So in China, those things were like the seeds and the shells and all that stuff, but here it's like rock or sand, or there has been glass as a form of it. And it is calculated basically on how many grains per inch. So I cut out an inch of sandpaper. This is a 36 grit. The grains are pretty big, but that's how it's calculated. And the lower the number, the less grains of whatever in that space, the higher the number, the more there is. Sometimes that's a really basic thing to me, but it's surprising that some people don't understand which direction the numbers go in. So the lower the number, the coarser it is, the more aggressive it is. The higher the number, the finer it is, the later you're going to use that in your process. Then also for grit, there's all sorts of different materials of grits, or different materials types. I'm going to just focus on the ones that are for woodworking. I mean, there's so many things, but I'm going to focus really on woodworking stuff tonight. So you've got garnet. Garnet is a natural occurring substance, and it is a common grit material that they stick on things. It's inexpensive, but also it doesn't last really long. So that's why it's typically only used in for hand sanding or on softwoods, because it wears down fairly quickly. That being said, it's very inexpensive. So in this situation, you get what you pay for. It's just what it is. It's just like sand that goes to the beach. So it's not going to last as long as some of these other more man-made materials, but that's garnet. So you might hear about garnet once in a while for wood sanding. We've also got silicon carbide, less common so much for sanding on wood, but you're going to run into that more for sharpening or use on metal and things like that, glass. Silicon carbide is a really sharp, almost like a pointed shard of material, and it's really good for those kinds of things. It's really good with a lubricant, and it's also something that's used in a wet-dry situation. But on wood, some hardwoods especially, and on some metals, when you're trying to do heavy usage, those shards break. They're brittle. They break really easily. So it's not so common to use it directly on wood, which leads me to the most common grit for woodworking, or grit material, which is called aluminum oxide. You guys have probably all heard of aluminum oxide. Super common, most common, and probably the best one that's available right now, just kind of a general purpose kind of thing. So aluminum oxide, a man-made, more manufactured kind of material. It's inexpensive, it's really hard, and it lasts a long time. It's the most common material, or really good material for sanding hardwoods, and metal. So really, really good. And your money goes farther with aluminum oxide than some of these other materials. So those are the three main grits. Silicon carbide and aluminum oxide are the two most common grit grain materials out there right now. But for woodworking, it's by far aluminum oxide. Then, so we've got all these grains, but now from here on out, I'm talking aluminum oxide. Okay? So the other part of sandpaper where people start to get a little confused, and sometimes they think more with their wallets than other things. They just want to get the cheapest thing, but sometimes they're not getting the right material, and that's backing. Okay, so there's paper backing, which are the least expensive, and then there's cloth backings. But with cloth, there's a whole bunch of different options from very inexpensive to very expensive. And sometimes you need the really expensive ones, but I'm going to go through those for you. So obviously paper, it's typically in sheet form or in sanding disc form. I don't have any, oh, here. Colin brought a disc. This is paper as well. So these are the most common things you guys are going to be seeing in your wood shops that are paper backed. Okay, they're great and they're inexpensive. So that's paperback material. It also comes in roll form. Like this would be something that goes on a product that we make called the Flatmaster, the Velcro drum sander, the V drum. There's paperback sandpaper there. It's the least expensive, but it will tear very easily. Like, no problem. So yeah, you're going to be able to pick it up for a lot cheaper, but you want to make sure, especially for a roll form in certain jobs that you have sanding rolls for, that you don't just, that you're paying attention to the backing material. So I guess that's in the descriptions of things. If you're on a website, if you're on, like, I'm not saying you have to buy sandpaper from us at all. We sell some really great products, but there's a lot of places you can buy it. So just pay attention to the descriptions. If it's paperback, if it's cloth back, the type of cloth that it is. So then we've got these cloth back options. I didn't put these in the right order. This is cloth back. So is this. So is this. Most sanding belts are also cloth back, but they all are different kind of weights and serve different purposes. So let's go through those. This is basically a general purpose shop roll is what we would call it. It's great. You can see how flexible it is. So this is the kind of cloth that's designed to be torn really easily. So for whatever size you need, you can just tear off as much as you want and use it. It's flexible. You can fold it up. You can sand it, sand whatever you want with it. But this, because you saw how easy I tore that, that would not be a good cloth for a sanding belt. You're probably not going to find belts in this, so you don't have to worry about that. But this would be a bad material to use on like a drum sander. But you're going to see the price compared to this or this, and you're like, you need it for a drum sander, and you're going to be like, oh, I really want to buy this because it's a fraction of the price of this. But this would be a bad choice. Don't do it because you're going to have to go back to the store or wherever and buy the correct stuff. So that's where you got to kind of pay attention. So this is like I said, a general purpose kind of cloth, easy to tear. Then you've got your heavy duty cloth back material. This is much like what your sanding belts are made out of. Very heavy stuff. This is specifically for a commercial drum sander. So when you put this on a sander like that, it's pressing into the wood. It's cutting a lot of material. That's why you don't want it to tear easily. So it will tear, but it's like a lot more oomph to tear this compared to this. This is no problem. You can just see the difference, the thickness of it, the flexibility of it. It's not going to tear easily. So make sure if you have a drum sander, I know you don't want to buy this sandpaper because it's not inexpensive. It's very expensive, but you need it. This is what you need because you're just going to get really angry if you buy something like this. Then there's another type of cloth. This is a J-Flex, and it is, oh, it stuck to me. It's actually made, this one has got an Egyptian cotton backing. So if you know anything about Egyptian cotton, it's like the best and the softest and the most flexible, really, really, really high quality. That's what this one is made from. So this one is specifically for wood turners. It's even more flexible than this one. But again, the cost on this one is more because it's a higher quality backing. And again, also harder to tear. It does tear, probably in the middle, but that, yeah, because of the flexibility. Yeah, so this is like really flexible. So when your piece is turning, you can just, well, you probably aren't gonna have a piece that long, but unless you have a giant piece, but you know, you're gonna be able to really easily manipulate this as you're sanding. It's not only for wood turners. This is a great sandpaper for carvers, all sorts of anything. I mean, there's not really rules on what you can use sandpaper for. There's just better situations for certain materials than others. So I guess that's what that. But this one is for us what we would sell the most to wood turners. The other thing about cloth back, the term cloth back, it gets a little bit confusing, especially in our business because we're selling a lot of hook and loop product. Sometimes people think that that fuzzy material on the back of sandpaper is cloth, but that's not what makes this cloth back. The fuzzy hook and loop is just a velour, they call it actually, and it's stuck to the backing. This is not a cloth. This is a paper back product with hook and loop on it. But you can also get the cloth back with the hook and loop on it. So there's a lot of different things, and you just want to make sure that you're getting the right products for the jobs. So this is a cloth back with the velour or the hook and loop on it. This is a paper back with the hook and loop on it. But that doesn't mean cloth. You have no idea. I try to make it really clear on our website, but you have no idea how many people buy this because it's really inexpensive and they assume that it's cloth back and then they get it and they're like, that's not what I wanted. Well, I tried to make it really clear, but then they have to pay shipping. Well, I didn't say that, but so the other part, so you've got all this sandpaper, you spend all sorts of money on it, you want to make it last as long as you can because you've spent good money on it. So a few things. Sandpaper does have a shelf life, just like food. There's a shelf life. You don't want to keep it forever. If you get a really, really, really good deal on something, just make sure you buy the quantity that you're going to use within a reasonable amount of time, like within a year or two max. And even that's probably pushing it. Because sandpaper manufacturers aren't going to guarantee it even after 6 months. So if you get your sandpaper, make sure you store it wisely. Sandpaper is all about also not just sand, not just backing. There's another important component to it, and that's the adhesive that the grit sticks to the backing with. And that adhesive is really, really sensitive to all sorts of conditions. As you can imagine, if it's not a wet, dry sandpaper specifically, do not get it wet. That will make the adhesives very angry. It just becomes basically garbage. So I found today, I went out back and out behind our shop and I found this, and it's a very exaggerated version of what would happen if you got your sandpaper wet. But this is the kind of stuff that happens on it. But this sandpaper is cracked. The grit is peeling away from the backing. If I tried to sand with this, the grit would just fall right off and it would be just a smooth piece of paper. So don't get regular sandpaper wet. Okay? Another sign, or like another thing, keep it in a dark place. Sunlight, sandpaper doesn't like sunlight. So keep it somewhere kind of dark, away from the sun, where it's not going to get direct sunlight. A somewhat regular temperature is good. When it's going from hot to cold too much, sandpaper is not going to really like that. Or too much humidity, doesn't like that either. And definitely don't store your sandpaper on a concrete floor. It's not a good place for it. It still kind of can get moist there, or get so directly on a concrete floor. I had one customer specifically over the years who that's where they stored their brand new, very expensive sanding belts, and they just got ruined. And we had to work through a whole process with them, but so we had to go through, please don't store them on the concrete floor. So that's a bad place to store sandpaper. What else am I missing on that? Just want to make sure I covered all those. Sunlight, temperature changes, breaks down the adhesives. Yeah, so those kinds of things all break down adhesives. Signs that your sandpaper is no good anymore. I mean, this is pretty obvious. The grit is falling off. The backings may be coming away. Discoloration. I found this. It's a little bit discolored. That's a sign. There's some more discoloration. Sometimes curling, like excessive curling of your sandpaper, is a sign that it's been exposed to some humidity and some things back and forth. It doesn't really like that. If you have a sanding belt and your joint is tearing, there's a really good chance those belts are old. And there's people call sometimes and they're like, how can I repair these belts? It's not easy. I don't know if there's a way. The belts that we have are this is like a heat sensitive tape that some big machine does. So there's no quick fix to that. If that breaks down, it's wrecked. So those are signs that your sandpaper might be past its prime. But there's some ways you can prevent these things from happening, at least mitigate the situation. Since I have a sanding belt in my hand, we all do this, but really I would recommend not doing it. But hanging sanding belts on the wall can be not great for that joint. So if you have another option for storing your sanding belts that's not hanging on the wall, that would be a good thing to do if you can. Also, just storing them in some kind of container like this, where they can be away from moisture. That's a good thing. Moisture, very bad. So protect them from moisture. Like a baggie works as well. And then this is like if you're really like you go to the store and you buy a whole bunch of meat and you vacuum seal it, you could vacuum seal your sandpaper too, and that would make it last longer. So that's also a way that you could store your sandpaper. Something else that a lot of people do, now that I'm coming to this sander, pretty much everybody stores their sander like this. That's how I found this one out in our shop, Ethan, when I went out there today to get it. But that isn't great for it. Really, this is a better way to store it. The reason for that is if you're hook and loop, which most people have a hook and loop sander. Oh my word. These sanders, the hook and loop system is made up on the sander. It's little hooks, and the back of the sandpaper is little loops. If you're storing it like this all the time, that's just heavy. And those are just tiny little hooks. And they get flattened out really easily with it sitting like this. So you can make this part of your sander last longer by just storing it on its side. It's never a perfect solution because even just using it wears those down. But while you're not using it, store it like that, you'll just make that last a little bit longer. and make your hooks a little bit happier, because then they can still connect to the loops on that sandpaper. So I don't know if I took up half an hour.
You did very well.
I timed it today and it was 20 minutes, but that was, I think I covered everything that I wanted to say. That was a lot in a small amount of time. But, and I know that Bob said I was going to do all about prepping your surface for sanding. I didn't really talk on that, but in a way, knowing sandpaper is prepping your surface, because you can be more prepared when it's time for you to prep your surface. So is there any questions?
Let's open it up to questions for Katie.
Oh man, Don, what do you want to know?
I know you guys sell sandpaper. Do you have a return policy for used sandpaper?
Yeah. Actually, if you go on our website, you will see that this has nothing to do with really your question. Obviously, you can't return used sandpaper, but we do have like a 6-month return policy on it, because the manufacturer, that's all that they will guarantee it for. So I guess that's a bit of an answer there, Bob. You had a question there too, sir.
On grit progression.
Grit progression.
Yes.
Grit progression. Oh, see, this is where it gets really personal. I mean, really, my suggestion always when people ask me what grit they should use, I encourage them to talk to other people who are actually doing it. I sell the product. We sell a whole range of grits from 36 grit all the way up into the thousands, and everybody will have a different opinion on what you should use. I can tell you most common grits, like the most common grit that we sell is 180 grit and 120 grit. Those would be the two most common grits. But everybody's going to have a different opinion on what you should progress at.
One rule of thumb though is the coarser the grit, the less you can skip. The finer the grits, the larger skips you can take.
There you go.
So if you're like, you can skip from 320 to 600, but you couldn't skip from 40 to 80. You know.
Yeah, sure. I know that wasn't a very helpful answer. Oh
Yeah,
man, 2 questions. Yes, you, sir.
What is Stockroom Supply? I've never heard of it.
Okay.
Only sandpaper? What
No.
is it?
Okay, so
Good
no, we
question.
do not. That's a really good question. When my parents started the business, like, I don't know, I was in high school, so a lot of years ago. It started with sandpaper. Literally out of our living room, we just had boxes of random orbital sanding discs, and that's what it was. Now, a lot of years later, we sell everything woodworking. We have router bits and actual tools like bandsaws and lathes and
Scroll saws.
scroll saws. I mean, you name it, we have stuff for sharpening. We have, Ethan, what else do we have? I'm drawing a blank.
Wood screw, glue, handling, CNCs.
Yeah, we have Melbourne wood planes. We have,
Mini slicers.
Yeah, we have a.
yeah, and then we have a whole series of our own stuff that my dad and Ethan have designed and manufactured.
One thing we don't carry at all those power tools. That's one thing, like DeWalt and Makita and that kind of stuff.
We try to focus on things that are not common for other people to sell. So we focus on brands that are less common to find, harder to find stuff. So we deal with Wrecker Power out of the UK. We are their exclusive Canadian dealer. The Klingspor sandpaper, that's the brand of sandpaper that we carry. There are other places that you can get Klingspor from, but it's not the same as you would go to a big box store and find that kind of stuff. What else?
So Raycon,
Oh yeah, Raycon.
like Starline Blue,
Yeah.
Ridge Carbide Blades,
Yeah.
some of the more common brands.
I'd encourage you, if you haven't seen their website, I'd encourage
And
you
I have cards up here.
to take a look at it, because the range of products is good. I'm speaking as a customer. They take my money. I'm not paid to say this.
That's true.
But the service is incredible. They know their stuff, and the quality of tools and materials is first class. So that's my unpaid testimonial, but check their website out.
And we have a YouTube channel that is pretty active, and we have like hundreds of videos on it. And so we put a lot of educational kind of stuff about the products we sell on YouTube. So you can find us on YouTube. You can find our website. We're on Facebook, Instagram, all of those places too. So
Google some of the old stuff too, like the stuff your dad put. It was awesome.
yeah,
right?
like my dad passed away 10 years ago, but his videos are still up there, and he was kind of before his time, before YouTube was a thing. My dad was putting out videos that were kind of funny. He called himself the crazy Canadian woodworker, and he did really silly things, and he hit 1 million views like sometime before he passed away 10 years ago, which at the time was kind of a big deal. So he did one video where he put, how did he do it, Ethan? He put a big chunk of wood on a tire of a van.
Yep.
And turned it with a big thing. That's kind of his video that he did. Ethan was driving the van.
The snow plows.
It's kind of redneck.
Yeah, redneck. Yeah, like dangerous. Don't recommend.
Fun
Fun to watch.
Yeah, but fun.
Okay, anyone else with a question for Katie?
Yes.
When you're talking about storing sandpaper, I work in a detached garage that has no heat, so in the winter it gets very cold. I just use a propane heater. Of course, if I'm in there for a couple hours, a lot of humidity all around. I just have my sandpaper just stored in like just a little wooden slotted storage case I built. Am I better off putting it into packaging like that?
You would be better off to, even if you put it in like Ziploc baggies and then put it in the slots, that would certainly be better than nothing at all. Just anything you can do to mitigate it, right? It's a tough thing to do because you're never going to use it all at once, but I'm sure you spent a lot of money on it and you don't want it to just all of a sudden be bad. So
Okay, so I should have better off selling it.
yeah, put it in like a larger version of a Ziploc baggie or something like that. Still, you could still use those slots and do something like that. So, and then the door prize for tonight is this. It's a pack of 4 different grits of this sandpaper. So whoever wins the door prize we brought tonight gets some of that.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie. Obviously, Katie has accumulated a lot of experience. She condensed it to a short because our meetings aren't that long. And she is really an Instagram star along with her brother.
I'm hardly on Instagram.
Seriously. And their YouTube videos are well worth watching. So I call her Canada's foremost sandpaper expert. She says that
He's overselling me.
Okay, but she knows a lot. Okay, thanks, Katie.
Not a problem.
Thank you to Ethan as well.